The sky bled crimson as the sun lowered itself behind the jagged horizon, turning the land into a canvas of long shadows and dying light. The prairie stretched outward, vast and merciless, a silence broken only by the whisper of the wind moving through brittle grass. He rode slow, reins loose in one hand, the other resting against the worn stock of the rifle across his saddle. His face carried the weathered hardness of a man who'd spent too many years alone, jaw locked tight beneath a streaked-gray beard. His name had once meant something in a town he no longer rode through. Now, out here, he was just another ghost drifting the wide country, living because death hadn't found the right moment. He might have kept on that way, quiet, stubborn, fading, if not for the sound. It was faint at first, a noise hardly strong enough to carry on the wind, a stuttering breath, ragged and wet like someone half-drowned. His horse's ears flicked forward, uneasy. He pulled the animal to a stop, scanning the brush. The plains were cruel that way. They looked empty until they weren't. He dismounted, boots sinking in loose dirt, eyes narrowing as he moved toward the mesquite thicket. That's when he saw her, small, crumpled against the roots, skin caked with dust and blood. An arrow jutted from her side, black with dried rot around the wound. She looked no older than 15, her dark eyes glazed but burning faintly with the stubbornness of someone who had refused to die though the world had already decided she should. Her lips parted, a whisper breaking free in a language he didn't understand, but the sound was heavy with grief and anger. For a long moment, he didn't move. He knew exactly what he'd found. Apache, and not just Apache, hunted, left behind because she wasn't expected to live the night. If he put her across his saddle, he'd be bringing trouble down on his own head. The army patrols would see her as an enemy. Settlers would spit at him, or worse. He'd known men to be lynched for less. Yet as he looked at her, he felt something shift in his chest. A memory, sharp as a blade. His own little girl, years gone now, lying pale with fever while he sat helpless, her hand small and hot against his. He remembered the way her eyes had begged him for something he couldn't give. He had failed her, failed his wife too, and buried them both beneath hard earth while the world carried on without pause. The girl before him drew a rattling breath, body shivering in the evening chill. He could walk away. No one would ever know, but he would. He cursed low under his breath, a sound rough with years of swallowed grief, and pulled the arrow free in one hard motion. Her cry was faint, more exhale than voice, but she clung to life with teeth bared against it. He wrapped her in his coat, lifting her carefully, and carried her back to his horse. By the time he rode into his cabin clearing, a squat shape of rough timber, smoke just starting from the chimney, she had gone limp against him. Inside, he laid her out on a cot by the fire. The room was bare, stripped of what a man needed, and nothing more. Rifle rack, tin plates, one chair by the hearth. He boiled water, tore strips from a clean shirt, and worked to clean the wound. Her body burned with fever, sweat shining on her skin, breath shallow and quick. When he pressed a cloth to the wound, she tried to fight, weak hands pushing against him. He spoke soft, though the words were meaningless comfort even to himself. "Easy, girl. Ain't nobody here to hurt you." Her eyes, dark as coal, found his. Suspicion glimmered through the haze of pain. She muttered something again, sharp syllables that cut like flint. He shook his head. "Don't know your tongue, but you're safe enough." Through the night, he sat by the fire, feeding her water by the spoon, watching the fever drag her into dreams. Sometimes she cried out, body twitching with old terror. Once, she clutched at the necklace around her throat, a small piece of carved bone strung on leather cord. He saw how fiercely she held it even in sleep, and it told him more than words could. It was all she had left. The storm came toward midnight, a rolling growl that grew until the cabin walls rattled. Rain hammered the roof. Lightning split the sky, thunder booming like distant cannons. He sat in the chair, staring at her as the firelight danced across her face, shadows carving hollows beneath her cheekbones. He could almost hear the storm speaking to him, asking the question he hadn't answered. What had he done, bringing her here? At some point, exhaustion pulled him under. He woke to her whisper, barely audible, lips cracked and trembling, but the word was clear. Vengeance. His eyes opened fully, the firelight throwing his face in sharp relief. He studied her, the weight of the word pressing against him. Vengeance was a poison that ate men from the inside out. He had known it. He had carried it once, dreaming of killing the men who raided his home. It had taken years, and still he hadn't put the fire out. She fell silent, her breathing easing into shallow rhythm again. He sat forward, elbows on knees, watching the flames collapse into embers. In the quiet after thunder, he realized he had crossed a line he couldn't step back from. The moment he carried her from the brush, the world shifted. Trouble would come looking. Soldiers, raiders, anyone with reason to want her dead. He rubbed his hands over his face, rough palms scraping against the day's stubble. He knew what he should feel. Fear, maybe regret. Instead, what settled in his chest was something heavier. Responsibility. He had chosen. The rain eased near dawn. Smoke curled lazily from the dying fire, light creeping across the floorboards. He stood, bone stiff, and looked at the girl asleep on his cot. She was alive, for now, because of him. But he couldn't shake the sense that she hadn't been saved, merely delayed. And if she carried vengeance in her heart, then by saving her, he had invited it into his home. Outside, the prairie glistened with fresh mud, air thick with the smell of wet earth. He stepped to the doorframe, staring at the horizon where the sun clawed its way up. Somewhere out there, people would come, men who wouldn't ask why he had done it, only whether he had. He glanced back at her, curled beneath his coat, and felt the unease tighten in his gut. The fire inside her had spoken. It was only a matter of time before the world came to claim it, and he would have to decide if he was ready to burn with it. The days that followed blurred together, a steady rhythm of survival measured by the hiss of boiling water and the rasp of cloth against fevered skin. The girl lingered between life and death, her breath shallow, lips cracked, but stubborn enough to claw at existence. He sat by her often, half resentful of the weight he had brought upon himself, half entranced by the sheer defiance in her eyes whenever she opened them. She didn't trust him. That much was plain. When he offered food, she turned her head and ate only when hunger clawed harder than pride. When he tried to ask questions, she answered in clipped syllables, Apache words he couldn't decipher or silence sharp enough to sting. Still, there were cracks. One evening, when the storm had cleared and starlight poured through the window's small square glass, she carved something into the wooden bed frame with the point of a nail, a pattern deliberate and patient, her hand steady despite the wound in her side. He didn't understand the marks, but he knew they meant something, claims of identity no fever could strip away. He gave her space. He had learned, in his years of silence, that forcing words never built bridges. They grew when left untended, like stubborn wildflowers between stones. So he spoke instead to the fire, words not meant for her, yet never hidden. Fragments of himself spilled out, sparse and dry as the desert earth. He had been a lawman once, back when towns clung to him for order. He had worn a badge with pride, until the day the world took his family. He didn't tell her their names. He never said what disease or raiders or soldiers had left him burying them beneath a leaning oak. But the grief threaded his voice all the same, and he thought she must hear it, because her eyes softened whenever his voice grew quiet. The wound knitted itself in time, though slowly, like the prairie learning spring again after winter. She moved about the cabin with careful steps, keeping distance but no longer collapsing at every breath. Her face remained guarded, but sometimes, when she thought he was watching, he caught glimpses of something younger, almost childlike. The tilt of her head when she studied the flames, the faint way her lips moved as if reciting words she didn't want him to hear. He didn't ask her name. He figured she would give it when she wanted, if she ever wanted. Instead, he studied the necklace she always touched before sleep. A piece of carved bone, etched with lines worn smooth from years of handling. Once, she caught him looking at it and covered it with her hand, eyes flashing. The message was clear enough. Some things were not as to know. One afternoon, he saddled his horse for the first ride into town since bringing her home. Supplies were running thin, flour, cartridges, lamp oil. She watched him from the doorway, leaning against the frame, wrapped in his coat, though the sun was warm. He met her gaze, saw the mistrust coiled in her stance. "I'll be back by nightfall," he said simply. She didn't answer, only shifted her weight, fingers tightening around the necklace. The town was no different than he remembered, dust rising from the main street, saloon doors swinging with lazy menace, children chasing stray dogs between water troughs. But the air felt heavier. As he tied his horse outside the mercantile, he caught the sideways looks, the lowered voices. Folks had noticed his absence these past weeks, and whispers traveled faster than truth out here. Inside, he kept his head low while gathering what he needed. Yet even in silence, suspicion followed him. A man by the counter spat into the dust and muttered, "Heard tell he's keeping company with a savage." The words weren't aimed directly, but they struck sharp all the same. He let them pass, jaw tightening, hand steady as he paid. There was no sense lighting a fire he couldn't stamp out. Still, as he rode home with saddlebags heavy, unease settled in his bones. The world had already started watching, and the girl had barely found her footing again. That night, she asked the first question she had ever shaped in his language. Her voice was rough, the word halting, as if she had wrestled with it before speaking. "Why?" He looked at her, puzzled. "Why what?" She gestured at herself, the scar still healing, the cot she had claimed. Her eyes demanded an answer. He considered lying, saying it was obligation or charity or mere instinct. But lies had no place here. Because leaving you would have been the same as killing you, and I've buried enough. Her gaze lingered on him, unblinking, before she turned away. She didn't thank him, but she didn't need to. The silence between them had shifted, almost imperceptibly, into something less brittle. As days turned into weeks, he noticed strength returning to her. She moved with a hunter's grace, quiet and deliberate, and when her hand brushed a rifle leaning by the door, it was not curiosity but familiarity. One morning he found her outside, aiming at a fence post with startling precision. The shot cracked the air, splintering with dead center. She didn't smile, but the satisfaction gleamed in her eyes. He frowned, uneasy. "That's not just skill. That's practice." She met his look without apology. "I remember." He didn't need to ask what she remembered. The word she had whispered in fever returned to him, vengeance. The prairie seemed to echo her intent. Soldiers had been riding more frequently these days, their tracks cutting the land like scars. At the edge of town, he'd overheard rumors of Apache raids, whispers of burned settlements, though he suspected the truth was more tangled. Still, it meant eyes were on the land, and suspicion was a fire that spread quick. One evening, as the last light died over the ridge, she sat beside him outside the cabin, both of them watching the horizon burn into dusk. The silence stretched long, filled with a hum of crickets and the occasional rustle of dry grass. Finally, she spoke in her own tongue, words he didn't understand, but the tone carried weight. Then, in halting English, she added, "They took all. I live for that." Her meaning was clear enough. Survival had not come free. It demanded payment in blood. He studied her, the lines of her young face hardened by something no child should have known. He wanted to tell her vengeance was an endless trail, that it ate at a soul until nothing was left. He wanted to say he had carried it, and it had hollowed him out. But when he opened his mouth, the word stuck. Who was he to deny her when he had walked the same path once? Instead, he only said, "Living can be harder than dying, but it's worth more." She turned to him, eyes glinting in the last shred of daylight, unreadable. For a moment, he wondered if she would argue, if her fire would lash out, but she said nothing, only touched the necklace and looked back at the horizon. The night settled heavy around them, stars sharp against the black sky. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, long and low. He felt it crawl into his chest, the sound of something wild and inevitable. When he finally rose and went inside, she remained outside a while longer, her silhouette framed against the silvered land. He watched from the doorway, a hollow unease gnawing at him. She had survived because of him. But survival was only the beginning, and he knew too well that the hunger in her eyes wasn't satisfied by life alone. By the time she came in, the fire had burned low, and her steps were quiet as shadow. She didn't meet his eyes as she lay down, yet the air carried the weight of unspoken promises. He lay awake long after, staring at the ceiling beams. Trouble was already circling, and though he didn't yet know its shape, he could feel it pressing closer with every passing night. The girl had been saved, yes, but not tamed, and somewhere out there, the world she had fled would come calling. The sun had begun its slow descent when he noticed a change in her. She no longer moved like someone recovering from wounds, but like a hawk circling prey. Her body carried the restless weight of purpose, every glance sharpened by something dangerous. He watched her practice with the rifle in the mornings, her stance steady, aim true. She needed no guidance, only ammunition, and she never missed. The sound of each shot echoed against the hills like a vow she had already made. He tried to curb it gently. Skill like that draws attention. Her response was a cool, even glance. I want attention. The words unsettled him. He had once dreamed of justice carried by lead, and he knew what it cost. The tighter one gripped vengeance, the less room there was for life. Yet telling her so felt like spitting into a storm. She carried her fire too deep, and he feared extinguishing it would only destroy her. When he rode to town again, suspicion had thickened. The stares were longer, whispers sharper. At the saloon porch, a soldier leaned against a post, uniform dusty but eyes keen. He straightened as the cowboy passed. "You've been keeping to yourself," the soldier said. "Word is you got company out there." The cowboy didn't slow. "Company's none of your concern." The soldier stepped closer, the air around him heavy with unspoken threat. "If it's what I think, it's every man's concern. Ain't safe, harboring what don't belong." The cowboy met his gaze, cold and steady. "Best choose your words careful." For a heartbeat, violence trembled between them, but the soldier smirked and let him pass. Still, the tension clung to the cowboy all the way home. The land itself seemed watchful, each shadow stretching long, each gust of wind carrying the taste of coming storm. She was waiting when he returned, standing at the edge of the clearing with rifle in hand. The look she gave him told him she already knew something he hadn't spoken. "They watch you," she said. "They watch us," he corrected. That night, he woke to the sound of horses in the distance. The rhythm was wrong for patrols. Too many, too fast. He rose, rifle ready, and stepped to the door. Dark shapes moved against the horizon, flames flickering where a ranch once stood. Raiders, not soldiers, not settlers. Men who thrive in the cracks between law and war, feeding on chaos. By morning, smoke stained the sky from 2 valleys over. He knew it was only a matter of time before they reached his land. When the attack came, it was sudden and merciless. The moon rode high, casting pale light on the clearing as the first gunshot split the night. Horses thundered, men shouting, their torches slicing the dark with fire. Bullets tore through wood, splinters flying as the cabin shuddered under the assault. He fired from the window, each shot measured. Calm born of years holding a badge. A man fell from his saddle. Another cried out, but still they pressed closer. The girl fought beside him, fierce and unyielding, eyes burning with that same hunger he had feared. She reloaded quick, her movement precise, and every shot struck true. For a moment, he almost believed they could hold. But the raiders were too many. They circled, cutting off escape, fire licking at the cabin's edges. The air filled with smoke and heat, the wooden walls groaning as flames crept higher. He grabbed her shoulder, shouting above the chaos. "We fall back, out the rear." She shook her head, eyes blazing. "No, we fight. We live," he snapped, dragging her toward the back door. Bullets thudded into the walls as they burst into the night, the cool air searing after the smoke. They sprinted for the brush, gunfire chasing them, dirt erupting at their heels. They dove behind a ridge, hearts pounding. The raiders' shouts echoed, searching, their torches weaving like restless stars. He pressed his back to the earth, chest heaving, and turned to her. Her face was smeared with soot, eyes wild, hands trembling though she fought to hide it. "You'd have died in there," he said. Her jaw tightened. "Better to die fighting. Better to live and choose when to fight," he answered. Silence stretched between them, heavy with more than gunfire. For the first time, she seemed uncertain. He saw the girl she had been, hidden beneath the warrior she was forcing herself to become. When dawn came, the raiders had gone, leaving the cabin a smoking skeleton, the clearing littered with spent shells and blood. They returned cautiously, stepping over bodies sprawled in the dirt. The place he had built with his hands was nothing but ruin now. The home he had offered her, gone in a single night. She knelt beside a dead raider, prying a weapon from his grasp. Her movements were cold, efficient, as though stripping the corpse was nothing more than survival. He watched her, feeling the gulf widen. She was no longer merely the girl he had saved. She was shaping herself into something the world would fear. He felt the weight of choice pressing harder. He could let her burn down her soul for vengeance, or he could try to steer her towards something else. But he knew either path would cost them both. She stood, rifle slung over her shoulder, eyes fixed on the horizon where the raiders had fled. Her voice was steady when she spoke. "This is not finished." He met her gaze, the morning sun catching in the smoke behind her, and knew she was right. The battle had only begun, and the men who had hunted her would not stop until one of them was ash. He smelled of ash for days after. Smoke clung to their clothes, seeped into their hair, turned every breath into a reminder of what had been taken. The cabin was gone, reduced to charred timbers and collapsed stone, a ruin where once there had been quiet. He stood before it at dawn, hat in hand, while she scavenged what little remained, bent nails, half-burned blankets, cartridges blackened but still usable. He felt the hollowness of loss again, though this time not for a family buried years past, but for a fragile piece that had been shattered beyond repair. They could not stay. The raiders would return, emboldened, carrying more men, more fire. She knew it as well as he did. She spoke little, but her eyes never left the horizon, sharp as if expecting riders to crest it at any moment. When he saddled the horse, she mounted without question, the rifle slung across her back. They rode into the desert, silence their only companion. The earth cracked and endless beneath them. The days blurred. Heat pressed on their shoulders by day. Cold clutched their bones by night. They made camp in abandoned arroyos, drank from muddy streams, and shared hard bread with an economy that spoke of necessity, not choice. He felt the weight of her presence differently now, less as a burden, more as something inevitable, as if their fates had knotted together the moment he lifted her from the mesquite. One night, as the fire cracked low, she spoke. "You knew them." He looked up. "Who?" "The men who burned, the ones who hunted." He hesitated, staring into the embers. Shadows danced against the canyon walls, painting his face in jagged strokes. "One of them, yes, a soldier once. He stood by when my family was taken. Could have stopped it. Didn't. Profit's easier than conscience." Her jaw tightened, and he saw his own rage mirrored in her expression. "Then it is not only my vengeance." "No," he admitted quietly. "It's mine, too." Her hand drifted to her necklace, fingers pressing the carved bone until her knuckles whitened. The firelight caught in her eyes, and for the first time, he wondered if vengeance was the only thing keeping her alive. They found the raiders 3 nights later. Or perhaps the raiders found them. Tracks led to an old mission half buried in sand, its bell tower broken, walls leaning but still standing like stubborn bones. Torches flickered inside. Horses stamped restless in the yard. He counted numbers, too many. Yet in her silence, he heard resolve. She had no thought of retreat. He studied her, saw the storm in her, and knew there was no turning back. "We end here," he said. She nodded once. No fear in her, only fire. They waited for the night to deepen. Then they moved. The first shots cracked like thunder, sharp and final. Raiders shouted, scrambling into the courtyard, only to meet bullets that split the dark. He fought with the cold precision of an old lawman, each pull the trigger steady, unshaken. She fought like wildfire, fierce and fast, her eyes unblinking even when blood sprayed the dust. The soldier appeared near the mission steps, a grin carved cruel across his face. His voice carried above the chaos. "I wonder when you come crawling back. Should have let the fire take you both." The cowboy's grip tightened on his rifle, old hatred igniting in his chest. But before he could fire, she stepped forward, rifle leveled, her body a line of perfect stillness. For an instant, the world held its breath. "You left my people to die," she said, her voice low but ringing clear in the night. "And his." The soldier sneered. "That's survival, girl. You learn." Her shot tore through the silence, striking him clean. He staggered, disbelief twisting his features, then collapsed against the mission wall. The echo rolled away across the desert, final as a tolling bell. The fight dragged on, but the heart of it was broken. The raiders faltered without their leader, scattering into the dark. A few lay moaning in the dust. Others fled with terror snapping at their heels. She wanted to finish them all, but he caught her arm. "Enough," he said. "Let them carry the story. Fear will do what bullets can't." For a long moment, she stared at him, fire still raging in her chest. Then, slowly, she lowered the rifle. Dawn came pale and cold, spilling across the ruined mission, across bodies stiffening in the sand. They stood among the wreckage, shoulders heavy but unbroken. He leaned against the wall, blood seeping from a wound in his arm, but his eyes stayed on her. She was no longer the dying girl he had carried from the brush. She stood taller, her expression hard but clear, something forged between survival and choice. "You have fire enough for both of us," he said. Her hand went to the necklace once more. She looked at him, a question in her gaze. "And you? What do you carry now?" He exhaled, the desert wind catching in his chest. "Not vengeance. Not anymore. Maybe purpose." For the first time, her lips curved in the faintest shadow of a smile. It was not softness, but recognition, a bond sealed in fire and blood. They left the mission behind as the sun climbed, two silhouettes etched against the endless plain. The past lay in ruins behind them, but the horizon stretched open, wide and waiting. Neither knew what awaited, but for the first time, they carried something more than survival. They carried each other. And in that fragile, dangerous bond, a new story had begun.